Okay, this is a little bit hard. It's now been approaching half a century since asteroids came blasting into arcade cabinets the world over. Back then we used to dream of a time when games would be so good they'd mirror reality.
2 of the tables my 3 o'clock, 1 cartel, 1 Iranian.
Like how we used to dream of flying cars. The crazy thing is that flying cars might still be a long way away, but the game dream actually happened. We've got these experiences available that are so deep and immersive. You have to ask yourself, why are we still darting around the screen and blasting isometric enemies to dust? Well, the simple answer is, despite all the decades, there's never really been a game that does what Hades does, as well as Hades does it. And there is a reason why it surpassed games like The Witcher and Zelda and Halo on IGN's top games of all time list. Mechanically, it borders on flawless. The moveset is supremely simple. 2 attacks, referred to as attack and special. A dodge move and cast, which is basically your grenade. 4 buttons on the gamepad, 4 moves. The learning curve is literally seconds, and once you get it, the game can chuck you any weapon and any enemy, and you can just let your fingers run on autopilot. But for all the clever gameplay design, really it's the structure of the story progression and all the little interactions along the way that raise this up from being just an addictive hack and slash to what some describe as one of the greatest games ever made. It's all cool, I know, but bear with me. Some games you play for the thrill, like arcade fighters, racing sims and sports games. Others you play for immersion, those that revolve around a structured narrative. Hades offers an intriguing mixture of both.
Orpheus is okay. Father loved her, didn't he? Mother, I mean.
And it keeps the repetitive cycle of action fresh through a continuous story developed in bite-sized pieces.
Oh, hey there, Doosa.
Its official genre is roguelike. It's a genre that's actually notoriously vague because the definition of roguelike has been in debate since it was coined in the 80s. Go check the Wikipedia page if you're brave. But in essence, Rogue was a sprite-based platformer in 1980 that inspired the idea that once you died, you'd start again from scratch, but every time you played a fresh run, random generation would mix up the levels and the enemies. One thing everybody does agree on is that luck plays a part as the difficulty fluctuates due to the random nature of enemies and the map. So to beat it, you need to get good. Good enough to beat almost anything it throws at you, and to keep trying until you luck out and score that perfect map seed. But what they're unofficially most known for is that nagging feeling of dying, knowing you should probably stop as it's like 4 AM and you should go to bed, and just thinking, oh, one more try. And with a full run of the game start to finish rarely taking more than an hour, it can take some determination to put down the controller. Hades itself, as you've probably guessed, is a fictional tale of gods stylishly woven into the grand tapestry of ancient Greek myth.
Glad to keep things interesting.
You play as Zagreus, prince of the underworld and the son of Hades himself. Side note, in very ancient Greece, he was actually considered the son of Zeus, but a playwright named Aeschylus rebooted him in ancient times as Hades' son. And this is only relevant because Aeschylus was a propagator of the infamous Greek tragedy type of play, and it's a tribute to his influence that 2,500 years later, Supergiant Games would use his version of Zagreus, because, spoiler alert, the story is a recurring Greek tragedy. Now, I'm no history buff, so I probably missed out on most of the other clues, but I'd argue that this is one of the many times it shows that the almost cartoony and light-hearted surface of the game hides a well-researched and multi-layered core. So it all starts here, your home, Base Camp Alpha.
Please make yourselves at home.
It's a calm and quaint space by design and serves almost exclusively for story progression. You'll find a handful of characters such as your mentor Achilles or your dog Cerberus, and usually Hades himself at his desk, processing the newcomers of the underworld and grumbling.
I'm standing right here, Father.
It's an intentionally sharp contrast to the hectic gauntlet where you spend most of your time, and as a result, the visual aesthetic is just pleasant and calming. As the core game plays like an arcadey hack and slash, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the narrative might follow suit.
No sign of Doosa.
I mean, these types of games are hardly known for their stories, but really that couldn't be further from the truth. Despite Zagreus' tall tales, or his public squabbles with Hades,
I thought she already told you.
or the fact that his escape attempts force him to bypass his very friends who are supposed to be guarding the way out,
I'll tear you limb from limb out there next time you mark my words.
the general fondness for him is clear.
Your enemy is not the wretched dead, and not your father, lad.
You can pick up these conversations almost every time you return home, or when you happen upon a safe room that contains a given character, and as you speak to them, the length of their dialogue is never more than a speech bubble will allow. You might have a couple of back and forths, but you never need to spend more than a few seconds interacting, which is inspired because it mitigates that risk of getting bored and just zipping past the encounters in order to hop back into combat. We're all guilty of it, and the game handles it well.
Now here, I'll send you on your way.
And that is where the game gets you in the ribs, time and time again.
Orpheus, forgive my bluntness here, but I have to ask.
You might go into conversations thinking you just need to advance the story so you can get back into the action, but then you get blindsided by the evolving stories of each of your friends.
Why, it's that I've lost my muse, my friend.
So much life is breathed into the static characters through their constant commentary on your actions.
What, did you break out of here only to die in some pathetic way on the surface?
Long story, but yeah.
All through the evolving dialogue about their past, or indeed about one another as you pass messages between them.
So let me see if I understand. Orpheus blew it with me like an idiot.
On occasion, the game will launch a short narrative segment that has you relive an event in the not-too-distant past, giving you yet more insight into Zagreus' motives and also what it is that drives him to escape.
I'm late for work. Father's going to kill me.
The characters are mostly voiced well, although due to being a lower budget game, the voice work is perhaps a little less inspired than some of the AAA voice work that we might be used to.
Next round's on me, Dusa, and you take care.
Zagreus himself is voiced by the game's composer, an American called Darren Korb, who, I presume for the sake of simplicity, went with a classical English accent rather than, say, Greek.
Oh, something's just about always amiss back home, sir.
And he does do an admirable job on the English accent, but despite the character's refined pronunciation, shall we say, that means he's posh. He adds a slightly bizarre mate onto the end of most sentences.
Fine day to you as well there, mate. For you, mate. Sound advice as ever, mate. Thanks, mate.
Perhaps it'll go over the heads of anybody other than the Brits,
Appreciate the vote of confidence, mate.
but it's a pretty odd combination which slightly jibes the immersion. The same actor does a great job on voicing the eccentric sparring partner Skelly, or maybe it's a crap accent and I can't pick it up.
Pal, watch where you throw those bloodstone things of yours. You drop them, you go pick them up, you understand?
But it does inspire fond memories of Disney's Hercules, and ultimately it's all in good taste. Aside from Zagreus' slightly placid voice style, as the story developed, it was impossible not to develop a fondness for him as a character. He has this dry wit that's integral for keeping the game lighthearted.
Calm down, Skelly. I'm sure whatever it is perfectly normal for a legendary semi-sentient titan-slaying weapon from the dawn of time.
He often makes light of tropes,
Hello? May I ask who's calling?
or provokes some of the more unpleasant characters, and he always maintains his cool and remains civil.
Enough to be mistaken for your blood.
Nice. Well, I'll just leave you to it then.
No matter how patronizing his foes become.
And who are you to judge, you misbegotten, shameful, unfilial maggot?
Of course, not all foes speak to you. In fact, for every one that talk, there are 100 that don't. All inspired by the underworld or specific Greek myths, continued encounters will reveal more information about them in your codex, but pretty much everything you need to know you'll figure out the first time they blindside you and torpedo your health. And losing health is something you need to get seriously used to because health is relatively sparse and you will die again and again and again. And when you die, where does one end up? Well, washed up at the mouth of the river Styx in the underworld, of course.
Oh, that stupid Hydra.
And this, truly, is where the game comes into its own. It may sound like a simple enough concept on paper, but you have to begin to see the game in action to grasp quite how well this mechanic actually works. Once you've stopped for some exchange with friends and maybe been berated by Hades,
Cerberus, look who it is! He's back!
you'll make your way into your bedchambers, where you'll have access to a large mirror provided to you by your foster mother, Nyx. Here is where you invest your darkness, these purple crystals, which will slowly improve your long game. You pick them up while journeying through the underworld, and while they may not be an entirely welcome sight as they have little use during the run, after you return, feeding them into your mirror provides improvements to your moveset, such as improved dashing or death defiance, which essentially amounts to more lives. There are countless upgrade options for the aesthetic of your home, as well as gameplay-orientated buffs such as adding random healing fountains that might appear on your run and so on. And this key here, it unlocks things like more abilities on your mirror, or your cache of long-forgotten godly weapons found behind your bedroom.
Aegis, shield of chaos, lend me your power.
You start with a sword and then a bow, allowing you two very opposing experiences. You attempt both the snap reaction in-your-face combat style of the blade, and more considered ranged attacks that rise from managing the bow. The keys then unlock a spear, a shield, a pair of punching gauntlets, and an M4, godly machine gun with grenade launcher. All are extraordinarily well balanced, and while the shield exclusively is like playing with a pair of stabilizers due to its ability to block everything short of an area attack, No one weapon is a golden bullet, and all have a staggering number of potential paths depending on what you find as you play. And what you find, of course, is random, although some clever scripting does go some way to ensure that you never get overburdened with too many useless pickups. Nevertheless, as you make your way through the many rooms, referred to as encounters, that make up the full run, while you'll always get a reward, sometimes you'll be offered a choice of what the reward is at the end and sometimes not. But if you have a choice, then you have a decision to make. You can focus on progressing as far as possible, maybe get a little bit further than last time and see what's what, or you can sacrifice the current run, perhaps because you want more darkness or because you feel like you're not doing particularly well. In those cases, you can choose to prioritize darkness and keys and so on, but more often than not, that's not your goal. Most often, you'll be playing to win, and on those occasions, it's the other pickups you'll be hoping for. The pickups you can't take home with you, the ones that only affect this specific run. First, you've got health, which tacks points onto your total life in the form of centaur hearts. Then you've got coins that you can trade in for specific items at the boatman's shop. You've got the Daedalus hammer, a super juicy pickup that you usually see once or twice that offers an overpowered upgrade to your chosen weapon, altering its functionality in some way. For instance, it can transform your grenade launcher into a rocket launcher, or upgrade your shield's bull rush so that it now just shoots a dart without charging into enemies. Or it can make your spear rapid fire, and then if stacked with another, can rapid fire 3 prongs. Even seeing an image of the Daedalus hammer online gives me goosebumps now. My brain's programmed to get excited. But most importantly, you have your boons.
In the name of Hades.
These boons are pretty much the game's core mechanic about which everything else grows, and it's through these upgrades that Hades has built such a solid reputation as an addictive and ever-changing experience. Story-wise, the boons are your fellow gods and relatives up on Olympus, calling down to you and offering aid. In part, this is to stick it to Hades because, as you might have heard, they are notoriously, in fact hilariously, petty.
Alright, no need to fight about this any longer, don't you think, nephew?
But also it's because they do actually want to see you up on Olympus, being their long-lost and as-of-yet unseen cousin.
Don't ever back down. What is this, like the 20th time that you've attempted to escape?
But mechanically, these are a list of 3 upgrades from which you can pick just one. You'll get the opportunity to stack dozens as the game marches on, and with these little pomegranates that you find as well, you level them up. But the joy of the game comes when you manage to stack enough coinciding boons atop one particular move that it essentially becomes overkill. The game doesn't cap these power upgrades either, so if by luck or perhaps by careful selection you manage to get multiple abilities that all focus on, say, your standard attack, your entire game would then naturally revolve around that single move. Sometimes you don't get that lucky and you have to work with what you get, but again, forcing your hand often reveals another playstyle for that weapon that you never would have tried unless forced. If you spend valuable health points to enter randomly spawned Chaos Gates and meet the Chaos God, they'll offer you a heavy handicap for the next 3 encounters, but a free, permanent upgrade henceforth. I once received 2 of these, both of which provided 45% extra damage on my special. That might not mean much to you, but that's almost double damage, which I can tell you now is an unusually high amount when added to whatever boons I collected. I was using a spear, and it was right at the beginning of the game, which means I hadn't really settled on any particular move or direction for my boons yet. The special on the spear is to throw it, after which you recall it for heavy backstab damage. Until that point, I'd actually found it a fairly ineffective attack and rarely used it because I thought it was slow, but double damage was enough to encourage me to give it a go. Suffice it to say, when boons relating to the special attack cropped up, or those relating to backstab damage appeared, I went for them. The result was a ludicrously powerful ranged attack that I'd not yet experienced with the spear, and actually never have since. Suffice it to say, I kicked ass on that run. And this is just one example of how you might find yourself navigating the waters of boon upgrades. It's random, yes, but once you get a feel for the damage and the foes you might face, it allows for a certain degree of forethought versus risk when mapping out a potential route through to the very end. Although there are quite a few gods, you won't see them all from the start, and they all specialise in different types of bonuses. For instance, no surprise, Zeus's moves revolve around lightning and chain attacks. Hermes, the speedster, focuses on speed and mobility.
You're going to love it on Olympus, little godling.
Aphrodite likes to weaken or charm enemies, and so on. Most importantly, it's simplistic by design and doesn't require much consideration or mental arithmetic to calculate the best combination. They're all pretty game-changing, and pausing to pick one won't take long enough to slow the pace. Rarity simply indicates if a boon is more powerful from the outset, and a drip feed of pom fruit to allow you to upgrade the boons as the game marches on, which in effect scales the power of your chosen abilities in line with the increasing challenge from your enemies. The throwable red crystal called your cast will weaken enemies against your attacks in its vanilla state, but boons can turn it into anything from a gas bomb to a giant laser beam. Cast boons can be so effective, especially when combined with the right weapon, that it has the potential to become your primary form of attack, which yet again will instantly change your gameplay path and all your following upgrade choices as you find yourself darting around, casting tactically and then hiding behind pillars while they do all the work. The underworld itself is divided into 4 levels, each of which have a unique aesthetic and enemy type, and always topped off with the same boss. The rooms shift, which you're told is by design to stop the undead ever escaping.
The chambers of Tartarus have probably all rearranged themselves by now.
But of course in Treat it's an inspired way of meeting the roguelike characteristic of changing levels up and always keeping you on your toes. As I mentioned, the pickups are sometimes choice-based, sometimes not, and one of the items that you'll find trickling into your inventory is called Nectar.
The perfect gift.
Hades is bandit, so naturally you'll have to give it out on the sly.
Found this, thought of you and all that, so...
But giving it out you do, using it to carry favour with all the NPCs, and in turn receive a gift back. So the more NPCs you track down, the more gifts you get.
Now, take your finder's fee and go about your business.
These gifts are accessible in your armory just before the game starts, as well as the rest areas between each level. They offer yet another baseline upgrade, such as encouraging a specific god to appear and offer you boons, or, my favourites, which are basically anything health related. So as you can clearly see, when considering your gift of choice, your weapon of choice, a possible alternate weapon path from the hammer, your cast and any of its variations, potential chaos gates, and then the countless boons that you'll stack up as you progress, the potential combinations increase exponentially. You'll no doubt favour certain abilities and invest in them when they do come up. I got a little addicted to the auto-aiming death lasers in my early playthroughs as they can take a lot of heat off you while you're adjusting to the speed of the game, but you may well go for hours without seeing it again, so you simply can't place too much reliance on any one style. But variety is the spice of life, and with every run being different, and indeed every visit to your home being fresh, the desire to keep playing and letting the random generator spit out another creative mix of abilities for you seems to have no limits. And talking of innovation, a very clever system misleadingly referred to as God mode in the options menu. This is perhaps the slickest alternative to the easy, normal, hard system I think I've ever seen. When you switch it on, and every time you fail and head back to the Great Hall, you get another 2% damage resistance as a permanent buff, so long as the option is toggled on. It does cap at 80%, but that should be more than enough for even the most inexperienced of players. But in order to reach that fateful number, you'd still have to complete 40 runs, which is enough to unlock a sizable chunk of the game anyway.
How many times has it been now?
Stats claim that most players first escape when they're about 30. It's like hanging a cheat code in front of your nose, carrot on a stick style, and as you pursue it, you find yourself completing the game anyway. So even if you're hopeless at these kinds of games and you really fancy having a go, then with God mode on you can just push forwards, business as usual, and you'll ultimately reach the same progression milestones as a far more dedicated player. When you do successfully escape, the buff doesn't increase, thereby holding the difficulty level at a position just right for you once you start making successful runs. After I'd had my fill playing without the buff, I wanted to accelerate the unlocks to get a better understanding of the latter parts of the game.
Never gone this far.
And I found this an unbelievably useful addition to the game, especially because you can just switch it off. It just makes the experience that much more personal, allowing everybody to get their money's worth without having to invest hundreds of hours that you might not have to hand. On top of all of this, as if that weren't enough, is the music. As a company, Supergiant Games have always placed an emphasis on the soundtracks of their games, and Hades is no different. I mean, the menu music alone is enough to get you in the mood. And the levels themselves where you face a diminished threat is cool but minimalistic, with measured backing tracks that don't intrude on the experience. And then they suitably wind up as the challenge progresses into boss battles, often with an extra dose of shredding. Some of the tracks really sound like they're straight out of a live session. And others, like this alluring safe room melody, give you an excuse to let your thumbs rest and actually enjoy the break before heading out to finish the level.
Must be Eurydice.
Oh, hey.
The music is a shining example of how the sum of great parts can come together and make a whole which is truly outstanding. After I successfully escaped for the first time, I thought I would be in a position to put the controller down and start to compile my thoughts, but to my amazement, It in no way ended the story. Quite the opposite, actually. I found myself back in Hades with fresh questions, a fresh excuse to escape, and discussing the matter with your friends around the underworld treated the event like just another stop on a long train ride.
Mother, I have to get back there.
I won't reveal the story developments here, you really do need to experience it for yourself, but suffice it to say that the developers absolutely addressed the issue of how to wrap up the story while still encouraging you to continue playing the game. To discover the true ending, you do need to escape a lot more times than once.
Blast. Bear. On. What? You dare on. Take me home.
Yes.
And there is an ending, and even after the ending, the story still continues. But to understand it all, you really do need to play it. It is honestly inspired. How they'll manage to address this in Hades 2 remains to be seen, as some stories simply don't leave room for an expansion. Although having read some of the early release information, it seems like they still haven't dropped the ball in the innovation department, but let's just leave it at that. This is a game that can be played alone or can be played with friends, and I have thoroughly enjoyed both. It started off as an exercise in understanding why it was revered so much online, and somewhere along the way I fell in love. It features a stimulating and addictive combat system, intertwined with a narrative structure that's both innovating and charming, all presented amongst super stylized lore and catchy backing tracks. It is a masterpiece of indie gaming made with top-class production values. Reviewers usually rate it somewhere around 8, 9 or 10 out of 10, and while I won't be attaching a number to it, it most definitely sits somewhere in that range. I cannot encourage you enough to buy this game. It'll become a staple on your console, and even if you don't think it's for you, I expect you'll find yourself coming back to it again and again and again. A like or subscribe would be so valuable to me if you can find the time to click that button. Thank you so much for listening. Take care of yourself, and see you next time.